Wow, thank you for that special music. I also want to say thank you to Sheldon and the Whitley's families for taking the time to travel here. Really appreciate that. I know that means a lot to them as parents, and it's special. And it shows how significant this is and how important that we take that. So thank you so much for being here with them. We also have a certificate for you and a gift as a pledge of our support as a congregation. But I think our time had expired. Bradley had determined that our time had expired. But we do have a a certificate for you and just a little gift, like I say, to remind you that we as the church family are with you. That we want to lift you up in prayer and support as your extended family. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Heavenly Father, please be with us. Lord, help us to understand you a little more fully, a little more deeply, a little more intimately. And we just pray that you will touch each one of our hearts as we spend time together here. We ask this because of Jesus. Amen. If I were to say to you that you should study our doctrines more thoroughly and be well versed in our doctrines as Seventh-day Adventists, what is your initial response to that? Is it positive or is it a little bit negative? And you don't have to answer. I usually like to ask for responses. I just want you to think about that for just a second. Is it a positive or is it a negative response? And I say that because I know that I have heard, certainly for at least several decades, there's been a lot of discussion about who we are as Seventh-day Adventists and how that we think that maybe we focus too much on doctrines or prophecy. And maybe you've heard these statements, hey, it's about a relationship, it's not about the do's and the don'ts. And unfortunately, we've gotten ourselves into kind of two camps, haven't we? I want to just challenge that a little bit, and hopefully we can say, you know what? Those two things should not be sliced apart. They actually should be joined together. And I want to challenge you to think a little bit differently about the doctrines, because by definition, what does doctrine mean? What does it mean? What does a doctrine mean? A teaching about God. That's all it is. It means a teaching about God. And I want you to think that rather than just a set of information, our doctrines actually reveal something very significant about the character of God and about how he wants to relate to his created beings. So indeed, they do reflect upon our relationship with him, and we can learn a lot by these doctrines. We're going to take a look at three this morning, but for example, quickly, the doctrine of hell. What does that reveal about the character of God? Now you can respond. It's okay. Now we're opening it up and you can respond. What does that reveal about God? So, okay, there you go. So whose version of it? So pick one and then share. What version of that doctrine?
He's a merciful, just God.
Okay, so our understanding of hell is that it's finite, right? It has an ending. Right? That God will punish sin and sinners and he will destroy sin, but that he does not torment sinners for eternity. Right? Boy, that's a huge statement about the character of God, isn't it? Absolutely. So it helps us to understand who God is, what he's like, how he relates with people. God is not sadistic. What about the state of the dead that ties into that? I think that reveals something very interesting about God. Because what do we believe? So when we die, we lose consciousness, correct? It's a sleep. Can we commune with anyone or anything? No. Now, how does that contrast with the belief of virtually all of Christianity? Kind of the opposite. What happens when you die? You go directly to heaven or to hell. Now, I have never been to a funeral or heard anybody talk about somebody deceased as going straight to hell. I've never heard that. But that is part of the doctrine, is either you go directly one place or the other. So let me just share this. I think this reveals something very significant about God and his character and about his relationship to human beings. If indeed we were to go directly to heaven, that would be a joyous thing for God, wouldn't it? Doesn't God love his people? Now he can physically be with them. Would probably be a joyful thing for the person who's there. But what about you as the loved ones who are here? Is it a joyous thing for us? It's an incredible time of grief, isn't it? You know, we talked about Job. We talked about Job in Sabbath school, who lost all his children. I can't imagine. I think the loss of a child has got to be, maybe that is the most horrible thing. Because it's not supposed to be that way. We're supposed to go before our children. That's a tough thing. Here's what I think this reveals about the character of God. God is not yucking it up with our loved one in heaven while we suffer. Think about it. Think about this. God suffers along with us, doesn't he? Can God commune with that person that he loves? No. God has lost them just as we have lost them. Are you with me? Am I wrong? Am I messed up here? No. What? Evelyn's with me. He is with us. God is actually sharing in our grief when we lose a loved one, because he has lost communion with them as well. And when will he be reunited with the one he loves? When we can also experience that reunification, correct? Now, you say, was that a big deal? I think it is. I think it's a huge deal, and I think it reveals an awful lot about the character of God and his relationship to us. Now, there's precedent for this idea in Scripture. Take a look at Matthew 26 and verse 29. There is precedent for this idea. Matthew 26, and we're going to look at verse 29. This is Jesus with his disciples there at the Last Supper. Verse 29 of Matthew 26 says, "But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." So Jesus says, look, this is something very special. This is a very special and intimate moment that we are sharing together here. But you know what? As beautiful as this is, as significant as this moment is, I will not do this again until I can do it with you on the other side. I'm going to save it for that special time. There is another example of this, which you probably had never thought about, but it also illustrates it, and I can tell you that as a veteran, this is something that means something to me and is dear to my heart as well. And I understand, Whitley, that your father is a retired military man. So can he relate to that as well? And that is in the story of Bathsheba and Uriah. Go to 2 Samuel 11. 2 Samuel 11. We're going to start in verse 8. We're going to look at verse 8 through 11. But starting in verse 8 of 2 Samuel 11. Before I do that, let's get a little bit of context here. Everybody's familiar with the story of David and Bathsheba, correct? Right? David, Bathsheba, and then, of course, you know what happened. And then he invites Uriah home because he wants to try and cover his sin. So let's pick that story up here. 2 Samuel 11, we're looking in verse 8. And it says, "And David said to Uriah, 'Go down to your house and wash your feet.' So Uriah departed from the king's house, and a gift of food from the king followed him." But here, catch this, look at verse 9. "But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house." Now, why on earth would he do that? He has gotten a reprieve from the battle, the killing, the suffering, the awfulness. He can come home and be with his wife. David says, "Go be with your wife." And he says, "No, I'm not going to do it." Let's keep going. He'll tell you why. Verse 10, "So when they told David, saying, 'Uriah did not go down, did you not come from a journey?' Or I'm sorry, down to his house. David said to Uriah, 'Did you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?' And Uriah said to David, 'The ark and Israel and Judah are dwelling in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go down to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live, as your soul lives, I will not do this thing.'" Do you see what Uriah is saying? He's saying, my brothers are out there dying. They are suffering and they are dying and they're going through hardship. I can't go yuck it up at home while they're doing that. I can't enjoy myself while they're suffering. I won't do it. Out of love and respect and to show the significance of my relationship with them, I won't do this thing. You know, I want to take a little bit of a side note here. Let me tell you something. Have any of you ever read a Medal of Honor citation? If you haven't, do it. Do it. It is phenomenal when you read what men will do in defense of the ones they love. And you realize that's why they do that. When you read those Medal of Honor citations, they don't do that because of patriotism and the love of country and all of these high and noble things. Those things are good. That may get them in the service, but it's not why they do those incredibly heroic things. I've already alluded to it, but why do they do those incredibly heroic things? For who? For their friends. It is the deepest form of that philos love, isn't it? That brotherly love where you develop that bond. And here's somebody who's in need, they need you, and you're willing to do whatever you have to do to help them, to save them, to protect them. Uriah says, "No way, I'm not going to do it." And I believe that's the same sentiment that God has. When a loved one dies, he says, "You know what? I will not enjoy the communion with that person as much as I would love to. I'm going to wait until we can do it together. I'm going to wait until you can enjoy the fellowship of that one you've lost. I'm going to suffer right along with you until we can all enjoy that reunion together." I think that says a lot about God, doesn't it? It really does. It really reveals his desire for intimacy and for sharing in what we have to go through. Something else I want to draw your attention to, and I want you to go to Job 13:15. Job chapter 13, and we're going to look at verse 15. Now, the first part of this verse, I'll bet all of you are familiar with. But I'll lay $1 to a donut that you have never thought about the second half of that verse? Job 13, verse 15. And I'm looking at Job 15, 13. Let me get to the right place here. Job chapter 13, verse 15. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Have you heard that one? That's an awesome verse, isn't it? Isn't that a great passage of Job's expression of trust and surrender to God? It is. But look at the second half of this verse. Even so, I will defend my own ways before him. Does anybody else have another version of that? And if so, will you read that for us?
But I will maintain mine own ways before him.
Okay, that's, yes. Anybody else? Anything different than that? Argue? Okay, yes. Go ahead. I'm going to argue my case with him, absolutely. Another thing, the literal meaning of that word before is face. In other words, I'm going to argue to your face. Whoa! Now, is this an expression of a stubborn bowed back? No. But Job is saying, listen, God, I will trust you. I will trust you. Even if you kill me, I'm going to trust you because I'm going to completely surrender to you. But I still want to know what is going on. Now, if God slays Job, when will Job encounter God next? At the resurrection. And if you read Job, it's clear Job believes like we do. He believes that he would sleep and then he wouldn't see God until the resurrection. So what does Job understand? Job understands about the millennium. Right? He understands that at the resurrection that there will be a time. Now, I think that this millennium is more than just a legal process. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. I'm sharing with you a thought. You can disagree. But I think there's more to that millennium than just the legal process of looking at people and going, well, that's why they didn't make it, right? That's what we know. Folks, this doctrine of the millennium is a very beautiful doctrine and a very relational God. And here's what I mean by that. I believe it's a time set aside where we can ask the question, why? Why? Do you think there are a lot of people in this world that suffer that are asking why? Job was. And Job clearly, in complete and full surrender, said, you can kill me, but if you kill me, the next time I see you, we're going to take this up again. And I'm going to ask why. Why was this happening? What was going on? I don't understand it. Because did God tell him in the end of the book? No, God shows up. God doesn't have an apology with him when he shows up. And he just says, look, where were you? And you see that. He goes, it tickles me actually because he says, all right, Job, sit down, be quiet. Okay? I want you to, I'm going to ask, you're going to answer. It's kind of interesting. But yet, Job apparently knew, and I believe this, I believe Job understood that there was a time set aside where God would be able to answer the whys. And I think of so many people. You know, honestly, I think of Steve. And I think you folks know Steve's story. With his son and grandson, and then his other son. You don't think he's got some why questions? I know, I think of the worst funeral I ever did. We had just moved from Missouri to Texas. And I think it was about 6 months after we were in Texas, I got a call to come back and do a funeral for a 16-year-old girl who had gone to a park to take her own life, called her brother, and her brother and father raced down there. She's still alive when they make it there. And then as the paramedics are there taking her, she had shot herself, taking her to the hospital, the father just kind of lost it. I don't know what the details are, but what I know is that after that, and she died on the way to the hospital, and they ended up indicting him for interference. So he gets this court case against him. I, that's right. I forget. They just they drop her as I guess they're loading her in. Anyway, he has to go through this after the loss of his daughter. I can't think of anything worse if you can imagine your 16-year-old daughter and knowing that she's suffering so deeply that she wants to take her own life. That was just horrible. And then 5 years later, 5 years after that, the father took his life. So do you think that the mother of that girl and the wife of that husband has some why questions? Folks, we could go on and on, couldn't we, with examples. Here's what God says. This is what we know about his relationship to us. God says, please trust me now. But I have set aside a time in the future when we're going to work it out. When you can ask me. Because think about it. Because as I was processing through this of getting excited, I'm thinking I'm looking at this and looking at that second half of that passage, and I'm going, okay, Job, this is kind of awesome, Job. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, you're a real dude here, because Job is a superhero in the Bible, correct? What he goes through, and he maintains his faith and so forth. And you look at this and you think, man, hey, you're actually a pretty real guy. I can relate to this, that yes, you submitted, but yet you still said, even though I submitted, even though I'll trust you if you kill me, I still want to know, God, we're going to take this up. And as a friend of mine who shared this, he goes, this is a 15-round title fight. Job dies in round 14, but he says, look, when I get resurrected and I see you, we're gonna go round 15. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. What I'm saying is that Job is a real person, and he's going, man, God, I want to know. I don't understand. I trust you, but I don't understand. And as I said, my thought was also, well, why doesn't God do that right away? Why doesn't he just somehow reveal this to us right here and now? Wouldn't it be so helpful? But you know what, folks? There are some things that you just cannot communicate to someone by an email, by a text, or even by a phone call. Are you with me? There are some things that you have to communicate face to face. And I believe these are things that fall into that category. So when God reveals all of this and shares these things with us, we can actually be in his presence. Think about it. We can actually hear the sound of his voice. We can look at the love in his face. We can feel his arms wrapped around us as he's telling us why. Now, I actually was sharing with a friend of mine. He wasn't so sure. He thought maybe I was a little bit too much speculation. And it may be. Like I said, I wouldn't argue with you. If you say, no, I don't think that's the millennium. But let me ask you this. Let me just share some things. I think the thought was, hey, once we get to heaven, it's so exciting, it's so thrilling, heaven is cheap enough, all of these things that there won't be any need for healing. Really? Counselor, let me make my case that there actually will be. Let's go to Revelation. Let's go to Revelation. We're going to go to the very last book of the Bible. You maybe know what I'm headed to. But in Revelation 22, Revelation 22, look at verse 2. Revelation 22, verse 2. In the middle of its street and on either side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the what? So do you want to make a case that there's no healing needed in heaven? I'd say you're dead wrong. I rest my case. There is a need for healing in heaven. And are there tears in heaven? Absolutely. In fact, if you go to Revelation chapter 21, Revelation chapter 21, you take a look at that. Revelation 21 verses 3 and 4, and when it talks about those tears being wiped away, is that an event that takes place at the beginning of the millennium or at the end of the millennium? At the end. That's at the descent of the New Jerusalem. Folks, it seems to me that there's going to be a lot of tears during that period of time, even though we are going to be so happy to be in the presence of Christ. We're going to love to be there. We're going to love to be in his presence. But there apparently are tears shed during that period of time. And I believe that the wiping away of those tears is God going through with us regarding the wise. And he will bring that final and full healing for the wise. Though you slay me, yet will I trust him. But I'm going to maintain my way to his face. I still want to know why. And what is this for? Let me just kind of share. I think this is all preparation for what God has in store for us in eternity. What is the role of mankind in eternity? Well, let me just share a quote from the book Prophets and Kings, page 588. You know what Lucifer says to Jesus? He's now Satan. You know what he says to Jesus while looking at us as humans? And you can see there, he says it with a sneer. Are these the ones that are going to take my place? See how incredulous he is? You see how messed up we are? These are the ones that are going to take my place? Now, what does he mean? What was Lucifer's place in heaven? Ezekiel 28 says he was what? The cherub that covered. We talked about it in Sabbath school this morning. Lucifer had the closest spot to God, did he not? He was the cherub that covered. He was the one that was the closest to God, that should understand the character of God the best. And it was his ability to share that with everyone else. In fact, if you think about those cherubs on the ark, they have 4 faces. Right? You remember that? They have 4 faces. Lion, ox, eagle, and what? Man. Is it possible that they're a representation of glorified humanity? That is our role. It would appear to me that that is indeed our role as humanity. We will become the cherub that covers. Where is God's throne? In the New Jerusalem. Where's the New Jerusalem? Here on earth. We are going to take on that role as that person, as that group, if you will, that is the closest to God, that will be this intimate with him, and we will be able to share with every other being in the universe. And I can't help but wonder if that is not a part of the reason why God can say in Nahum 1:9, affliction will not what? It will not rise again. And I can't help but believe that that will be our role. And again, I'm speculating here. I get that. You're just seeing old Dwight speculating, okay? I get it. And you can disagree with me if you want, but I can't help but wonder if maybe our role won't be that somewhere in eternity, because it also seems that God's going to continue to create. Do you think? I don't know. I'm not saying, but it just seems like his nature is creative and that he will create. And if he creates a new world, it's a new world created. And it may be our job, and I can say, hey, Stanley, hey, Todd, God just created Planet X913F1. There's some new, fresh folks out there. We're going to go out and pay them a visit. And we go out, and we're there talking. And they're in the enthusiasm of life, right? They've just been created. They've met Jesus. They've met God. They know the Spirit. And we come to kind of hang out. And, you know, maybe they pose the question. They're like, man, this God guy, he's awesome, right? Yeah, he created, this guy is he really as good as he seems? Guess what we can do? Son, sit down and let me tell you. I got a story for you. There was a time that where the New Jerusalem is, that world rebelled. We were sinners. We rebelled against God. We were awful. But he came in the flesh, in person, to that world. And he suffered and he died. And to remind you, if you think maybe I'm fibbing or I'm fooling you, next Sabbath when we all gather together, I want you to go up to Jesus and ask him to show you the scars in his hands and in his feet and in his side. I can't help but wonder if that won't be our role throughout eternity. Because we have a special relationship to God, don't we? We have tasted a side of the character of God that no other being ever has, nor ever will. What is that? Redemption, right? What's that song? When we sing redemption's story, what do the angels do? They fold their wings. Yes. So, let me challenge you. When you think about our doctrines, I want you to start thinking about what that reveals about the character of God and how he relates to humans. Whether it's death, the Sabbath, hell, the millennium. I hope you can love God a little more deeply. Before I say the closing prayer, I just wanted to share something with you, kind of a personal nature, and also to invite you. Here recently, Jenny and I made a decision to be rebaptized. And lest I'll share a little bit, just because the mind has a way of going, oh my, right? Just like in ancient Israel, when the person was dragging that lamb across that sacred hollow square over to sacrifice to the priest, and everybody got to see that and go, oh, I wonder what he did, that he's got to take a lamb there to, you know. I will say maybe it's not so much what we did, but the condition of our heart. And I'll just say this, that if you let bitterness and anger take root in your soul, it'll just destroy everything in your life. It really will. I just want to read this. This, I think, sums it up. It's a passage from the book Evangelism. It's just a short paragraph, and I think this certainly helped me as I pondered, should I do this? It says, the Lord calls for a decided reformation, and when a soul is truly reconverted, let him be rebaptized. Let him renew his covenant with God, and God will renew his covenant with him. Reconversion must take place among the members, that as God's witnesses they may testify to the authoritative power of the truth that sanctifies the soul. So we did. I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but we want to invite you to that baptism, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit how this kind of played out. Actually, one of the men that works for us there at the venue, Lane Buttram. Lane's actually a cousin of Steve's, but Lane had decided to get rebaptized, and a couple that are members of the Floral Crest Church that actually we did studies with for just a little bit here recently decided to get rebaptized. And so Jenny was actually the first. And she said, hey, can I join in on that? And so she said, hey, I'd like to join in on rebaptism. And then, of course, I thought and followed. So that baptism will take place next Sabbath. Okay, it will be at Floral Crest, but we would love to have you guys there. Absolutely would love to have you there if you want to be. We'd love to have you join us. We're going to do it in the afternoon, though. So it will be at 2:45 Eastern Time. So at 2:45 Eastern Time, we're going to have the baptism. Again, I share that, and I want to invite you. Not trying to make a big deal out of it, but I think it's something, a decision that we have made, and so just want to invite you to that. I think we can sing our closing hymn.